Hello and welcome back to Cult Leader. I'm your cult leader, Spencer Henry, and I've got a crazy Lifetime case to talk about today. It's been a while since we've had a Lifetime movie of a case. It's got all the drama, but none of the moida. Okay, yeah, you heard me. I know, Spencer, this is Cult Leader, but baby, we've got a crime to talk about today, at least according to the court system. Actually, some of my favorite episodes of Cult Leader are ones where, in fact, nobody dies. And maybe they're the cases you'd least suspect to hear on a true crime podcast. But alas, we're here. All of this to say, the other night, I had some alone time. The champ was going to a yoga class after work, and all of a sudden I had this solo evening, which rarely happens. So I queued up the cheesiest Lifetime movie I could find on Amazon Prime, and I had no idea, to be honest, that it was even a true story or based on a true story until those classic end credits came on where they're talking about what happened to everybody. You know what I'm talking about, like so-and-so ended up moving to blah, 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 and so-and-so became a teacher. You know what I'm talking about, the end of a movie. Anyway, this beautiful made-for-television film, which is how I rank a movie. If it's made for TV, it's made for me. And you know, these days, the world is just dreary right now. I think we can all agree. It feels a little dark, feels a little heavy. So allow me to take you out of that for the next 30 minutes or so as I tell you about this tale that involves some big hair, some big lies, a suburban house, betrayal, and a courtroom climax to end all courtroom climaxes. Does that make sense? I don't know. Who cares? I am just all about this case. Okay. I wanted to know everything I could find out. And so now I'm here to tell you about it. The movie that I was talking about came out in 1999, and it's called The Price of a Broken Heart. That's the movie this case that we're talking about is based on. And it's one of those old school 90s Lifetime mom movies where the wife finds out that her husband's cheating, and then she gets revenge. But this revenge didn't involve a deranged kidnapping, no slashed tires, no dramatic poisonings, and definitely no moida. It was way more lawful than that, literally. Civil law. So come back with me. We're going to start out our story on October 14th, 1978, because that is when Dorothy Rowan, sometimes I've seen her called Dot, which is the cutest nickname, married Joseph Huddlemeyer, Joe. Dorothy and Joe, Dot and Joe, okay? The lovebird newlyweds settle down in Alamance County, North Carolina, and over the years, they would go on to welcome 3 children into their family. Their marriage throughout the 80s into the early 90s had been all of the things that you would want from a marriage. It was loving, warm. They just seemed hopelessly devoted to each other, as Olivia Newton-John might say. They were one of those couples who did everything together. They vacationed together as a family. They volunteered at church together. They coached their kids' soccer teams side by side. Joe traveled frequently for work, but that didn't mean that they had to spend a lot of time apart because more often than not, his doting wife, Dot, would often travel alongside with him. And they went to all kinds of places because of Joe's work. They went to England, Hawaii, Arizona, Florida, West Virginia, Boston, San Francisco, always side by side. It's a dream scenario, right? When your partner has to travel for work, getting to go alongside them. Dot described it as a fairy tale marriage. She was truly, I think, at her core, happy. It's the 90s dream. And Joe was her prince. And he leaned into that role too. He was quite the romantic, cheesy, some might even say. In 1981, Joe had written her a poem titled Why I Love You. And then nearly a decade later in 1990, he wrote a sequel. That's how in love they were, okay? He wrote Why I Love You too. And he gave it to her for Valentine's Day. A few years down the line, he gave her a Valentine's Day card with a heart that he had drawn himself and recorded her a cassette tape of love songs, which might not seem like much now because you can just throw together a Spotify playlist for anyone. But back in the day, making a mixtape for someone, that was some serious effort. Very sweet. That's how I would describe their relationship. And things in the bedroom, they weren't bad either. I'm not here to air anyone's business, but according to all sources, they had a very loving relationship, if you know what I mean. Not out of any obligation, no routine. They were still banging at least once or twice a week, loving it. In fact, there was no reason to think that anything would ever change. There was no signs. But eventually, Dorothy started to notice something started to shift in their relationship at some point around 1992. The same year he'd given her that lovely Valentine's Day homemade card and mixtape. Seems like something just shifted after that. It wasn't the same. Joe had started losing sexual interest more and more, and at first it was very subtle. He was a little distant, a little hesitant, and then one night when she tried to make a move on him, he pulled back and was basically like, I don't feel right about doing this. It's not a good feeling. She's like, what? Since when? Now, someone else might have immediately suspected, am I being cheated on? Something going on here, right? But Joe would never do that to her, or so she thought. He, of course, reassured her like, oh no, don't worry. This has nothing to do with you. You look great. I love you. Nothing is wrong in our relationship. I love you, love the kids, love our family. It's just, I'm under so much pressure at work right now. All of the stress, the responsibility, it's just weighing on him, right? That's what he tells her. He wasn't in the right state of mind. And she had no reason not to believe him. Joe had never been unfaithful throughout their entire relationship, and dry spells are normal during relationships. Life happens, stress happens. Sometimes you're just not on the same libido wavelength. But by 1994, they had stopped having sex entirely. Not even an occasional quickie, no birthday sex, nothing. Even so, Dorothy, or Dot, at her core, believed their foundation was still intact. She's like, we still seem happy. Kids are great. We're still having fun together. And there's a lot more to love in life than just sex. But soon she started to notice it wasn't just sex anymore. Joe was withdrawing from her more and more, almost like a stranger. What happened? He started coming home very late. He'd leave their kids' soccer games early, claiming that, I got to get back to the office. I got to work on something. It's important. I wouldn't go if I didn't have to, right? That's what he's pitching to her. He stopped letting Dot be his +1 on business trips, which had been their thing for years. She had always gone with him. It was time away from the kids. Suddenly, there was this new company policy that banned spouses from traveling. Very convenient, some might say. Now, Cult Babes, as you've probably guessed, by this point, Joe had in fact begun stepping out on their marriage. There was no extra work to be done at the office. There was no company policy banning +1s for travel. In fact, Joe was indeed bringing a +1 on his business trips, but it wasn't Dot, his wife. Instead, he was bringing along Margie Cox. She was Joe's secretary, and this betrayal runs deep. Margie had been working for Joe for years, all the way back to 1986. And around the office, she'd been described as very matronly. She wasn't this sexy secretary with horn-rimmed glasses and big tits bending over his desk like, Joe, is there anything else I can do for you? At the time, everyone was having fun with fashion, but Margie would wear these basic dark outfits to the office. Drab, long sleeves, long skirts, very conservative in her appearance, nothing flashy or attention grabbing, almost like homely, I guess you could say. But in May of 1992, something changed. Margie had separated from her husband. Suddenly, her whole vibe shifted. She was free to be free. She cut and dyed her hair. She started wearing short skirts, low-cut blouses, tighter clothing to the office. And coworkers noticed this change in her demeanor. This wasn't just physical, and it wasn't subtle or meek anymore like she used to be. She became openly sort of flirtatious around the office, and we love that, right? Like you get out of your relationship. Stella, get your fucking groove back. We're all about it. We love a comeback. But this is 1992. Remember that. Because if you're thinking, wait, isn't that when Joe started acting up and becoming withdrawn from his marriage? Yeah, girl, it is. You already know where this is going. Joe and Margie had a thing going on. And they were discreet about it at first, but barely. And that discreetness eventually was thrown out the window. Coworkers would see them arriving at work together or within minutes of each other. All right, it's looking a little suspicious. People are talking. The gals are gabbing at the front desk, okay? They started going out to dinner alone together. They started working late, except they were often the only two people left in the building. Curious, right? And Joe's car would be the lone one in the parking lot. How's Margie getting home? Well, I think we know how Margie was getting home. The two of them started to get really comfortable at work, holding hands. Margie straightening his tie in front of people. Those little things where you're like, Well, I mean, holding hands is a big thing, but like straightening his tie or whatever, you fucking know what's going on here. She's brushing lint off his suits. Very touchy-feely. Sitting in his office in ways that felt less professional and more personal. She had gotten very casual, which wasn't like it was before. At least that's what has been reported. I mean, the coworkers, they're at the water cooler. They're talking, right? They're on their smoke break. And they're all like, yeah, I think something's going on between the two of them. You see how she had her hands on him? During a company outing to a putt-putt course, like mini golf, they had shared a drink and stood close enough that she was eating ice from his cup. And that's when the coworkers, I think, were like, okay, something's going on here. It's not like we're hiding in the corner getting finger banged energy. Okay, this office knows what's happening, right? They're privy to this relationship, this budding, blossoming romance. And she also started traveling with him on all of their business trips. All of the business trips that Dorothy used to go on. The ones she wasn't allowed to go on anymore. Now, according to the court records I saw, Margie had never gone on any trips with Joe prior to 1990. And I believe most of her travel with him started in 1992, around the same time that spouse ban went into action. And we've got some like small town gossip vibes here because it later came out from Margie's neighbors that they had seen her boss Joe's car parked overnight outside of her house regularly from around 9 p.m. at night to 5:30 the next morning. So all fucking night. Okay. And it continued and it escalated. And she was brazen. Okay. His little side piece, she thought she was the main fucking event, which, you know what? Know your fucking place, lady. On Thanksgiving Day of 1995, this is a great example. Margie actually called the Huddlemeyer household and she's like, hey, do you know where Joe is? It's Thanksgiving, a family holiday. He's with his wife and kids, Margie, okay? He's with the family. He's at home. And how weird is that, right? The secretary's calling, asking where your husband is. Girl, he's with his wife. That's where he is, okay? Now, to be fair, Margie later claimed, and I'm saying claimed real loose here, that she believed Joe and Dorothy were separated and that he had moved out. She thought that he was living in an apartment and that the marriage was basically over. I'm not buying that this is what she actually believed. I think this is maybe what she told herself to not feel bad about the fact that she was destroying a family. But even if you take that at face value, why are you calling his wife's house on a holiday? It's fucking messy is what it is. And you're trying to set off alarm bells. That's what I think she was trying to do. Now, cut to New Year's Day, January 1st, 1996. Years this is happening, okay? While still legally married to Dot and not even separated, Joe proposes to his side bitch. He proposes to Margie with an engagement ring. Crazy work, if you ask me. And 4 days later, he tells his wife, that who he has this family with, this beautiful relationship, that he's leaving her and moving out. And she was, of course, shocked. She was heartbroken. She said it was the first time separation had ever been mentioned between the two of them. And in her mind, yeah, the marriage had problems, right? They weren't having sex as much. There was some distance. He was having to work a ton, but not divorce level problems. We're not going to work on this at all. And just like that, Joe, with no separation talk, no drawn out this is why or explanation of what went wrong when, he just tells her, I'm leaving you. And he goes and he moves in with his secretary, Margie. It can come off as extremely judgmental, everything I'm saying, right? Like there's there's 3 sides to every story, right? One person's version, the other person's version, and the truth. And granted, there were problems in their relationship. Cheating is never the answer. I'll never understand why people don't just end their relationship when they start feeling, I mean, I don't know. You know, it's if you've been cheated on, you know, that feeling of betrayal where you're just like, I would have rather have you just leave me versus find out that you've been having a fucking affair behind my back. It's crazy. And I fully believe that the responsibility falls on both Margie and Joe for this, absolutely. But I also know that there's some people who fall into the camp of like wanting to defend the other woman. But I think if you know someone is actively married and actively has a family with someone else, you're absolutely wrong for sleeping with them. And it's the same thing every time, right? Oh, well, they weren't happy in their marriage. Oh, they were planning on getting separated anyway. Well, then wait for that. I don't know. If you ask me, that's my opinion. That's my moral hill that I'll die on. I think it's wrong. You just don't fuck with someone's family. This left Dorothy, our sweet Dot, with some terrible heartache. She had trouble sleeping after this, as would anyone. She lost around 20 pounds because she just couldn't eat. She felt sick to her stomach. She was just walking around with that pit. She went to counseling through a women's resource center to cope with the emotional stress on her and the children, because now this isn't just her, right? She has to explain this to the kids, and just the grief of losing what she thought was a beautiful marriage. And the kids were affected by the sudden change too. I mean, nobody saw this coming. Not only the emotional stress, but also the financial. That's a massive change to their income, insurance, pension benefits, all of it. Their whole world and household got turned upside down by this affair. And Dot said she felt humiliated. She went through mental anguish, which affected her overall health. She believed that she had been wronged. She had been wronged. And she's like, I want something to feel right. And a divorce settlement was not going to be it. She's like, I don't just want that. Right? Yeah, I do want the divorce settlement. I do want the alimony. But you know what? I want to get back at Margie too, that little hussy at his office. She wanted to get a little clean revenge on both of them. So on March 8th of 1996, Dorothy files a civil lawsuit against Margie Cox in Alamance County. And she alleged two things. First, being alienation of affection, and second, criminal conversation. I'll break it down for you guys. Lawyer call babes, they're like, I don't need this broken down, but we got to break it down. Alienation of affection means you intentionally interfered with a marriage that had real love in it and caused that love to be destroyed. Because this is what Dot believes happened here. And criminal conversation basically means you had sex with someone else's spouse during the marriage. Dorothy claimed both. And the case actually went to trial in 1997, and it was kind of like a landmark case. At the trial, Dorothy presented evidence that her marriage had been loving and intact prior to 1993. She talked about their vacations, the poetry, the Valentine's tapes, their sex life. And then she talked about the inevitable gradual withdrawal, the late nights at work, the lies about company policy, the total lack of intimacy, and the flaunting in front of other people behind her back. I mean, that's what she was most upset about. And can you fucking blame her? I mean, at the office, in front of all these people who Dorothy regularly faced and welcomed into her home for holiday parties, coworkers at the trial testified about Margie's transformation after her 1992 separation from her husband. They spilled all the tea about the office flirting, about the late nights alone, how they would hold hands at work, the tie straightening, the putt-putt drink sharing, lest we forget, the open rumors. I mean, all of it. And Dorothy sat there. She heard it all. She heard it all. And Margie admitted, yeah, me and Joe, we began a sexual relationship in 1994. And yes, it continued throughout the duration of his marriage. But she also claimed that Joe told her he and Dorothy were separated and that she believed he had moved out. But the jury had heard everything they needed to hear. Okay, this looked like a classic affair. And guess what? The jury found Margie liable for both alienation of affection and criminal conversation, and they awarded Dorothy $500,000 in damages, plus another $500,000 in punitive damages. $1 million in total. Probably felt real good if you were Dot, honestly. And I know it's not just Margie's fault, right? And she appealed, of course. She argued that there wasn't enough proof that Dorothy and Joe had a truly happy marriage. She said the damages were excessive, and she claimed there wasn't enough extra bad behavior to justify punitive damages on top of everything else that she had been charged with. But in 1999, the North Carolina Court of Appeals reviewed the whole record, and they said, no, guess what, girl? There was enough evidence of love in the marriage. There was the mixtape, the hand-drawn cards, all of it. There was enough proof that it was destroyed. So the verdict was upheld. In my honest opinion, I think that should fall on Joe, right? I do believe Joe was the one who was married. He's the one who decided to step out on his marriage and betray his wife and betray her trust. And it's not just trust. It can be dangerous. You don't know what diseases somebody else might have. And then you're coming home. It's just, you don't fucking know. You're right. You're putting other people at risk. And it's just the ultimate sense of betrayal. And so when I was watching that movie and Dot won the case, I'm like, yes, girl. Because in the movie, at least, they make it very clear that the secretary, well, let me break it down for you. I think you guys should watch it. But in the movie, there's this one pivotal scene that I remember, and it's like a work Christmas party. And the woman who is portraying Margie Cox goes to her boss's house, Joe and Dot's house, and she sees him and how great he is with his family and how he's celebrating Christmas, because in the movie, Margie's husband is a total curmudgeon. She says he's so religious that he doesn't celebrate Christmas. And so she goes to her boss's house and he's like dressed up as Santa, singing Christmas carols with the kids. And that's when she decides she's going to go after him. He's like there, arm around his wife. Like they're like dancing together, singing Christmas carols, silent night, silent night. And that's when she looks at him and she's like, you know what? I want that for myself. I don't have that in my marriage, so I'm going after him. And so in the movie, when it happens, you're like, well, yeah, fuck you, girl. You saw him happy in his relationship and you decided to steal him. You're a thief. Okay, you're a home wrecker. Now, is that how it played out in real life? We don't know. We have to take people's word for it. And so in an effort to be fair, I will say, okay, maybe she did think he was on the brink of divorce or getting ready to leave his wife. That is something that happens in a lot of affairs. Men or women, they're like, I want to have my cake and eat it too. I'm not going to admit that I'm doing something wrong or calling it for what it is, an affair. And it makes me feel better about it if I tell you that, oh yeah, we're separating. Anyone could say, oh, I'm going to get separated, or, oh yeah, I'm going to leave my wife. Doesn't mean they're actually planning on doing it. So at least with this court case in particular, that jury, the men and women on that jury, they sat there and they said, yeah, based on everything we heard from coworkers who were there at the office, he is guilty, as is she. They were having an affair. We all knew that he was married. None of us had heard anything about a separation, and we all work very closely with him. And they were just kind of shoving it in their faces. So Margie's found guilty, as I mentioned. Dot's ready to collect her $1 million, and Margie tries to decline it. She appeals it, obviously, but the verdict is upheld. And then Margie tries to argue that the law of alienation of affection itself is outdated. It shouldn't exist anymore. But the Court of Appeals was like, hey, we'll let you know if you're ever on the Supreme Court. No, they tell her like, okay, lady, well, that's not our decision to make. We're following the law. She sued you for this. We think you're guilty of it. And we don't get to just change the rules. We just apply them. And by that point, when that was all said and done, life had sort of moved on. I guess Margie wasn't too mad about Joe allegedly lying to her about being separated from Dorothy, because the two of them did, in fact, go on to get married. Yep. Joseph and Margie, they got married on May 15th of 1997. And according to the end of the movie I watched, Joe and Dorothy ended up with joint custody of the children, and Joe and Margie reportedly lived right around the corner from Dorothy. And that, I don't know if that was a petty move or what, but that feels fucking messy to me too. Like, go at least a street over. Okay, I don't want to fucking see you driving by. But I did get curious about the whole alienation of affection thing, because it does feel in a lot of ways outdated. Now, I love when a woman scorned gets her revenge. I will always root for them. But I'm like, is this a thing that is still happening to this day? Like, even though to me, the 90s were like 10 years ago, I know it was a little longer than that. But how often are people actually suing over affairs? Turns out, a lot. Most states abolished this law decades ago, mostly between the 1930s and the 1970s, but there are a handful of states, including North Carolina, that didn't. In North Carolina alone, roughly 200 alienation of affection cases are filed every single year. So if you live there, just know you have that option. That's about 4 a week, just in one state. But before we get into some other cases that I want to talk about, here is a simple breakdown of how this law even works. In North Carolina, a spouse can sue a third party, usually the lover, if they can prove or show the court three things: that there was real love and affection in the marriage, which I feel like now would be easier than ever, what with text messages and social media. None of that, trust me, I understand. None of that means anything, but it is evidence, right? It's easier to track. There's written record. They also have to prove that the love was destroyed, that the defendant's wrongful or malicious conduct caused it. And then here's the other thing. They don't technically have to prove sex to claim alienation of affection, but if there was sex, that opens the door to a second claim called criminal conversation, which does require proof of sexual intercourse during the marriage. Like, I don't know. This is where like a private investigator would come in handy, right? Since sex is usually involved with affairs, most plaintiffs in North Carolina sue under both of those laws or rules. There are limits to this, though. The conduct has to happen before separation, and the lawsuit must be filed within 3 years of the last act. So you got to move quickly here. But if the claim is within those boundaries, it's very real, and juries take this seriously. Dorothy's verdict wasn't a one-off thing either. Just a couple of years after Dorothy v. Margie, in 2001, a Mecklenburg County jury awarded $1.4 million to a husband who sued his wife's lover. Yeah, works both ways. But that award was later reduced on appeal, I believe. And then in 2010, there was a woman who won $9 million against her husband's alleged mistress. I mean, this couple in this scenario had been married for 33 years, and she believed her husband was deeply in love with her until she started noticing late nights at the office, suspicious credit card and cell phone charges. It's harder to get away with things these days as well. So a private investigator eventually confirms that her husband's having an affair, yes, after 33 years, and the jury rewarded her with $5 million in compensatory damages and $4 million in punitive damages. In 2011, a judge awarded $30 million in another alienation case, and that's one of the largest awards on record. And then most recently, you guys, there was another case involving social media. Told you, it's easier to track things now. According to case files and reports, here's how it started. In October of 2018, a young couple named Akira and Timothy Montague got married in Wake County, North Carolina. And over the next few years, they built a family together. They welcomed 2 children, one in 2019, and then the other, I believe, was in 2021. And according to Akira, by all accounts, their marriage was loving. They shared genuine affection. Akira says she was committed. She's a faithful wife, right? She's maintaining a stable home for her husband and the kids. As far as anyone could tell, they were just a young family doing their thing. They had made it. They're living the American dream. But then, through family connections, the couple met Brene Kennard, a North Carolina social media influencer with millions of followers across TikTok and Instagram. And she, I guess, had built her audience based on just sharing pieces of her life. This is me. Here I am, my authentic self. She wasn't just some random person who appeared out of nowhere. She was married to the husband, Timothy's cousin, and the two couples became really close with one another. And as they started to spend more and more time together throughout 2023, they started showing up in each other's social media content. According to Akira, she considered Brene a really good friend by that point. They talked about their marriages, they confided in each other about all kinds of secrets. But she felt this like very true, genuine relationship, this true connection, this true friendship. But by late 2023, the tone of their content started to shift. Posts started featuring Timothy and Brene more and more together without Akira or Timothy's cousin, who was married to Brene. And sometimes Akira wouldn't even know about it. I mean, imagine that you're just scrolling and then you see your fucking husband with his cousin's wife. I'd be like, okay, this is a little strange. And then according to the case files, in December of 2023, Brene and Timothy had sex inside of Timothy and Akira's marital home. And it didn't stop there. According to the filing, the sexual encounters continued in all kinds of places, including Akira and Timothy's bed, even while Akira was asleep in the house. Girl, you've got another fucking thing coming to you. You disrespect me like that. Can you fucking imagine? The complaint also mentions sexual videos, photos, text messages, and ongoing communication between Timothy and Brene. And on top of that, Brene allegedly posted on social media talking about how she couldn't wait to become Mrs. Montague and openly talked about very intimate details of their relationship. Akira says she found out about the affair in January of 2024 after seeing videos of Brene and Timothy inside of her home doing some sketchy shit. Okay. In one of the videos, they were cuddling. In another, Brene was twerking and rubbing up on Tim in the bathroom. I mean, weird things to be doing with your husband's cousin. Okay. And after that, Akira said she started to notice changes in his behavior. She says he became emotionally distant. She would hide his phone and messages from her, refused to go to marriage counseling. Girl, it's like, why is you need to bring your phone in the shower? That's a little weird. Okay, a little suspicious. On March 14th of 2024, they finally separated. And Akira claims that after Timothy left their home, he got help from Brene with housing. She says he co-signed a lease for him. And then a couple of months later, in May of 2024, Akira filed a civil lawsuit in Durham County Superior Court. She alleged Brene knew Timothy was married, went on to have a sexual relationship with him during the marriage, publicly flaunted it, and caused emotional harm to her and their children. All inarguable facts, correct? So she asked for more than $1 million in damages. And this is the TikTok era. Okay, influencers followed every update. Supporters showed up at the courthouse. That's right. Outside of the Durham County Courthouse. You got people out there with their phones making TikToks outside the trial. I mean, people were live streaming their reactions. They posted breakdowns, debated the testimony, came up with conspiracies. I mean, what could have been a regular civil case turned into this full-blown social media spectacle. And during the trial, Timothy testified that he was never in love with Akira, said their marriage felt more like they were just roommates, which even so doesn't mean you can go fuck your cousin's wife, buddy. And Akira's like, no, he's lying. She testified they were still acting as a married couple and they were intimate right up until the very end, up until the separation. Meanwhile, Brene, she's denying all the allegations. Okay, she's like, this is just about money. Okay, she's coming after me, my money. On November 10th of 2025, after about an hour and 50 minutes of deliberating, the jury reached a verdict. They found Brene Kennard liable. The jury awarded $1.5 million for alienation of affection and $250,000 for criminal conversation, a total of $1.75 million. Akira's legal team said the verdict was about accountability. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about money. And Brene and Timothy, they called it outrageous. Me, I'm just like, damn, I had no fucking idea. Well, I had no idea who these people were, but also had no idea you could sue someone for messing around on you. You know, bring it to every state. Okay, that's the thing that gets me. In most states, this would have been messy group chats, Instagram stories, maybe a dramatic relationship status change. But in North Carolina, it's pleadings, baby. We've got jury instructions. We've got 7-figure settlements, verdicts. I don't know. Good for you. Like I said, I'll always back the woman or man scorned. Your wife steps out on you, has an affair. I say the same thing. This goes both ways, buddy. So if you're ever in North Dakota or Mississippi, South Dakota, New Mexico, Utah, or Hawaii, and you're thinking about sneaking around with someone else's spouse, maybe rethink it because it could cost you a pretty penny. And that's all I've got for the week. I will see you next time. And until next time, don't go cheating on your honey if you ain't got the money, baby. Goodbye.